Hello, Dazzle. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I am glad that you are here. Today, I want to talk about the reasons that BMI should not be used clinically and should not be part of your weight management plan. BMI stands for Body Mass Index. This value is a number that is derived from a person's weight and height. The only reason that it is currently being used is because it is a convenient number rather than being a measure that holds any meaning or actual value. And I'm not the first to touch on this topic, and I am far from the only medical professional declaring that the use of this measure should stop. So let's start off with the fact that the BMI has no medical foundation upon which to stand. It was not developed by a medical professional with any medical research to explain or justify its use as a medical measure. The BMI was created in the 1830s, about 200 years ago. It was not created with measuring obesity in mind, but rather as a means to discover what was the average man. Nothing in the research for the BMI measured anything about a person's health or wellness. It was looking only at their height and their weight in relationship to each other. Nothing more than that. Lambert Adolph Jakes Catet was the person who developed the BMI, and even he stated that it couldn't be used to determine a person's fatness. And yet we do. The next thing to point out is that the math that creates this formula doesn't actually make any sense. The mathematician that created this formula couldn't get the data to line up into any kind of neat fashion, so he just invented a formula that made it kind of work. Generating someone's BMI requires you to just square their height. There's no logical reason that this would be required if there was an actual correlation between a person's height and weight. The truth is that this is the only way that the mathematician could get the numbers to mostly work. And since the data wasn't giving him what he was looking for, he just invented a formula that did. And this is the definition of bad science. BMI does not take into account where the person's weight is actually coming from. Bone and muscle weigh more than fat. And this means that if a person has strong, healthy bones and good muscle mass, they're going to weigh more. Those who are in this healthy category are often measured as having high BMIs that indicate that they are obese. And this fact alone means that BMI is a fundamentally flawed measuring metric, and it can't be trusted as an accurate measurement for a person's fat ratios. It should be noted that in population based studies, women generally have a BMI that is lower than men, even though their fat mass to body build is considerably greater. We have long established the reality that mathematical averages do not represent an individual in any kind of accurate fashion. Data averages lead us to information that cannot possibly be applied to an individual, with the classic example being that of having 2.4 children. There is a great deal of research that has gone into the proper way to evaluate data for the applicability to individuals. And none of those considerations are taken into account for the generation of a BMI. One of the major problems with the averages that BMI represents is that it mathematically assumes that tall people are simply scaled up versions of short people, and this is just not the case. Those who are taller also tend to be thinner and of a slighter build when compared to those that are shorter. These body ratios between tall and short people just don't equate to each other. They're different, and that's not represented in BMIs. The BMI data collected will always be skewed and not represent the actual population presentation. This is recognized as being a factor of significantly lower BMIs not being compatible with life, and those individuals thus not being included within the data. This means that BMI charts skew to the higher end because they don't fully capture this population. This means that what is presented as being an average BMI isn't even actually the average BMI, which means that what we consider normal based off of BMI average data isn't really based off of anything real. The human body is complex, and nothing about it has ever lent itself to such simplification. Our weight and risk for disease is just not any different. There's research that demonstrates those that are shorter have a higher mortality rate when compared to taller people with the same BMI. But this isn't something talked about in the medical field, and it isn't addressed within the BMI model. The medical field has taken the BMI and has generated categories based upon these numbers that are complete nonsense. It suggests that there is a clear and distinct categories between being overweight and a healthy weight. There's just no research to support these categories, yet we're using them to determine the medical advice and the medical care that we are providing to patients. Additionally, the research has shown that many of the people who fall into the obese category are actually within the average for the population bell curve, given the same mathematical standards. More recent research has shown that BMI is not actually a risk factor for cardiovascular disease or death related to heart health. This is just another indicator that using BMI to determine a person's overall health isn't clinically valid. Most researching the heart health consider this lack of correlation to be an issue with the BMI's inability to accurately measure the fat present in a person's body, let alone where that fat is being deposited, since the risk that's associated with heart health is having fat on your organs. So it's not surprising that there's no correlation between a person's BMI and their heart health. This is an unethical and discriminatory practice. Looking at the language of the categorization alone can reveal the manner in which people being underweight is preferred over those being overweight. Those who are in the category above normal are labeled as being pre-obese, despite there being no research to indicate that their weight predisposes them to becoming obese later in life. Yet those in the category just below normal are labeled as underweight rather than pre-normal. This highlights the way that medicine has pathologized higher weights in a way it hasn't for lower weights. And it clearly isn't working. We have been using BMI as a means to measure, categorize, and guide treatment for weight management. We're also using the BMI to guide decisions regarding public health policy. Yet, America remains the leader in the rates of obesity in the world. This approach to evaluating and treating obesity isn't working, and it doesn't make sense to keep a system that isn't producing the desired outcome. Well, that's about it for my rambling today. Thanks for coming and spending some time with me. If you liked the video, click on the like button. It really does help. And until we talk again, you guys be sure to take care of yourselves. Bye.